I always love the awkward space of like waiting for folks to connect.
I always found it really troubling when I was trying to, I usually use my phone for audio to help the video connection. And it's always like, people are like, oh, why aren't you responding? I'm like, it's still going.
Yeah. All right. So Connor, can you hear us?
I can. How are you all?
You know, I'm just really happy to see all of your faces and to be in virtual space together. And if y'all are ready, I'd love to kind of get started and welcome folks. See, we have a bunch of folks. I don't know if any of you all can see the attendee list, but welcome everybody for our Q&A alumni panel session. Before I let our wonderful fellow alum introduce themselves, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, we are going to have like a Q&A part at the end of this session. So please submit any questions through the Q&A function. I'm going to do my best to try to monitor the chat, but really that is the best way to get any of your questions answered. And also this session will be recorded and I will post it up on our website. Fun fact, our website is going to be going through some updates, so it may take a little bit of time, but it will be going up. And a little bit to preface this by saying I am Soraia Francisco. I use they, them pronouns. My role at Princeton AlumniCorps is the program manager. I just got promoted to program manager of Project 55. Yay! So I am the point of contact for everybody in Project 55. And it has been such a joy to get to know all the fellows. It's my favorite aspect of my work. And so I will let you all introduce yourselves. So I'll say, Jasmeene, do you want to start? And then y'all can go from there.
Mute is hard. Hi, everybody. I'm Jasmeene. I graduated class of 2019, and I just finished my fellowship June 30th, and I am from the Chicago cohort. I was with the Illinois State Board of Education. Lena.
Mute is hard. Hi, I'm Lena. I was also class of 2019. I am finishing, today is actually my last day at MNet. So I was part of the emergency medicine network up at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. I guess I pass it to Charlotte.
Hi everyone, my name's Charlotte. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm in the San Francisco cohort working at Altitude Learning, which is an edtech company, and I also graduated in 2019. Connor.
Leaves me. Afternoon, everyone. My name's Connor. I am also class of 19. He, his, I go by, and I'm currently in DC working for Peer Forward, and I will be continuing next year.
All right, awesome. So before we kind of launch into our conversation, I'd love to know who we have in the audience. So if you are joining, I think by phone you might not be able to, but via computer, put in the chat, what's your name, your major, and I'm also, while you're doing that, I'm gonna launch a quick poll with just a little question that you probably have gotten a bajillion times as you prepare for your final year. With Princeton. So let me do that. I pressed Q&A instead, my bad. So I'm gonna launch this poll, right? So do you know what you wanna do after graduation? Probably your favorite question to get, right? I'm sure y'all, as in Jasmeene, Lena, Charlotte, and Connor, have probably been asked that a lot your final year at Princeton, right? Okay, we got some absolutelys, some sort of, some I have no ideas. That's totally, yep, to be expected. And I see some folks, we have international. What, can we remind me what MOL stands for again, MOL?
It's molecular biology.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, it is. Computer sci. All right, some folks are from the Bay Area. All right, we're gonna end the polling for now. Okay, thank you all for that. So while y'all put your information in the chats, our application for our 2021-22 year has opened up. And so I figured that while we launch into this conversation, we start with the kind of application process. So I'd love to hear from all of you about what advice you have for students as they begin their applications. I know a few folks have already started, they've reached out to me. But yeah, Jasmeene, I know we had talked about this before, but what do you think candidates should be thinking about when they start their applications?
I think it's really helpful in the application process just to get an idea of what social impact means to you. What does that look like in practice? And what are some things that you're interested in learning, whether it's applying what you've done in extracurriculars or your academics, and where can that take you in the nonprofit space that AlumniCorps has to offer? Because there's a lot. There's many different ways that you can apply and learn things you've already started to learn or that you just have never had the chance to. And there are so many organizations that you can engage with in conversation and learn from. So like think about the big questions that you have, like what could this year teach me at this nonprofit in terms of future career? Like I'm interested in this, but I don't know if I want to commit to that yet. Could an organization help you figure that question out over the course of the year? I think that's definitely how I approached it. So just to see like what is the question that you have and what can be answered. I think that helps narrow down a little bit the anxiety of so many choices and options.
Thank you, Jasmeene. And so really this is a chance for y'all to kind of connect with one another. I'm gonna be kind of in the background doing some logistics, but Charlotte, I'd love to hear what you have to say and then we kind of go from there.
Sure, thanks, Soraia. I definitely agree with what Jasmeene said about sort of asking a big question. And also she sort of nodded to this idea that, you know, this fellowship is structured in a unique way in that you apply to the program and then there are a variety of organizations to choose from through this sort of, I mean, some of it is your choice depending on sort of what shakes out in the application process, but there are a variety of partner organizations. So I really love this idea of sort of thinking through what questions you have about how our society works or doesn't work in the service of humanity, and sort of what are those questions that you keep circling back to. So like an example for me, as I moved through, you know, my studies at school, my personal life, extracurricular life, I continue to be interested in this idea of education and equity, and sort of how can we empower all kids with the agency and the opportunity to shape society and sort of learn what it means to be an active, you know, citizen in society. So if there are certain questions that you continue to come back to, this is definitely a great opportunity to explore that and build professional skills while continuing to explore a question that continues to be meaningful to you in sort of all aspects of your undergrad career and beyond.
Thanks for that, Charlotte. And I know, Lena, you had mentioned something about being able to challenge yourself throughout the year. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was definitely something that I thought about, like definitely on top of a lot of what Jasmeene and Charlotte have said in terms of like what interests you and what questions you're asking. I think for me, I was also trying to think about like, okay, like how do I think I need to grow and what do I think I need to learn from this year and from this like really unique opportunity to be like a part of it, you know, to be a P55 fellow. I think, you know, it is like a really unique time in your life. It's like right after college and you have like a lot of thoughts about what you might want to do and what you learned in college, and kind of being able to do something a little bit out of your comfort zone, or, you know, doing something that challenges you or that you wouldn't think that, you know, might be part of your trajectory. I think, you know, P55 fellowships are a great way to like learn and grow in that way.
I would add one last thing to that, like echoing what everyone else has said. I think I remember when I was kind of in this application stage, it felt pretty natural to gravitate towards kind of this one idea of what I wanted this experience to look like. Like as someone that was pre-med, I was like, okay, I need to be in a hospital or like dealing with patients, let's look for something like that. But I think it's very easy to underestimate kind of the breadth and the range of opportunities that are available and the different skills they will provide and different perspectives. So, for example, my interest in public health and medicine, but I'm working for an education nonprofit. Sounds a little bit odd at first, but what was kind of important for me is I've been able to develop an understanding of the importance of social and cultural factors when designing interventions for different populations, and how critical it is to engage your target population when you are designing these interventions and having these conversations. And one of the phrases that my organization uses a lot is like nothing for us without us. So I think it's definitely a very holistic growth, especially when you consider the mentoring that's involved and kind of all the activities you have with your cohort that all have slightly different interests, but this core theme of service and working with and for others, just all the different approaches you get to see and learn from.
Thank you. Thank you. I definitely love that saying. And I think it's something really important for everyone to be thinking about when they're applying for any type of year of service, right? You're coming into a community, you're not there to, hey, I'm here to do these things. It's what do you need from me? How can I support you, right? So something that I know you've all come across and we've talked about is the need to kind of let go of this fixed mindset of being like, this is exactly what's going to happen, and like we cannot possibly stray from this experience, which I think life has shown with COVID of all things, right, that we can't control it. And so Charlotte, I'd love to hear about why you think flexibility is such an important skill for our fellows.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you all, during these sort of challenging times, have come to realize how important flexibility is. But sort of from the start of my fellowship, flexibility was incredibly important. It's sort of a long story, so I won't sort of go into all the details, but basically the partner organization is a software company. They also do some consulting with primarily for schools and districts. And when I went into the fellowship, it was called Alt School, and they actually had their own physical schools. But then sort of right before my start date, my supervisor called me and said, okay, we actually rebranded. So we're now called Altitude Learning, and we no longer have our own schools. We're actually partnering with schools and districts. So totally different sort of startup from the one that I thought I had kind of signed up for. And my first day, actually, I was packing boxes to like move to their new office location. So definitely a very kind of unpredictable and sort of unexpected start to my fellowship, but it's been super rewarding in any case. And I feel like the fact that I was kind of working across teams and open to a variety of different circumstances and possibilities was absolutely essential, especially now in this sort of COVID context where a lot of schools are grappling with distance learning. We're now kind of, we were focused on working with schools and districts, and now we've kind of opened up to explore possible ways to help, individual students and families. So every kind of type of transformation that you could imagine within one organization, I mean, that's sort of an exaggeration, but it has sort of happened in this past year. So yeah, I'm happy to go into more depth if people have follow-up questions, but it's just been entirely unexpected, but a great, introduction to the world of business and mission-based work, and a great way to build skills beyond what I could have sort of imagined from the get-go.
Yeah, jumping off this idea of constant change, within my first few months, we changed our CEO, developed new program pilots, streamlined many of the processes, had a lot of staff turnover. Personally, my role has gone from development to this hybrid of development, database management, and also evaluation. And I just feel like kind of that's what I've learned to be the nature of nonprofits, kind of this need to wear a lot of different hats at a lot of different times. And, my supervisor's always saying, yep, it's a new day, it's a new set of priorities, like completely different from yesterday. And I think that's something that I found a little bit strange at first, a little bit odd. But I think you start to be able to run with it and it becomes kind of exciting, and it's definitely a great feeling to develop that adaptability and, applicable to a lot of things going forward.
Jasmeene or Lena, do you have any flexibility, stories, examples, thoughts before we kind of shift gears?
Do I? I think this year taught me to reframe what the definition of flexibility is. I think I've always considered myself a flexible person in terms of I have a lot of capacity to do a lot of different things and switch courses really quickly. But I think also being in a situation where, especially in government, when you have new appointed persons, I came in where we were literally filling all the high level positions at my organization like the month after I came in. So there was a lot of like new turnover and learning to do things with new people. But it was interesting to see just flexibility is equally being able to switch tracks and switch gears and switch your working loads, but also learning to change and adapt and acquire new skills to work with other people, which is something that I think, I don't know if we always think about so much, but it's so valuable, whether you're at a nonprofit or whether you're at a larger organization. But oh goodness, I feel like I'm more flexible now. I could not have said that at the beginning of the year, being super type A, but I think it was definitely a lesson learned better the hard way. But it wouldn't change anything for the world, definitely.
I think the only thing I would add with my experience was kind of similar to what Connor said, but we a lot of my job was calling participants to follow up for our study, and there were scheduled participants that like had to be called every single day. So when we had to suddenly switch to remote work, it was like, okay, well, we can't really miss a beat here. So I think for me, what stood out was that, as long as you have kind of your priorities aligned and your priorities as a team aligned, it made jumping into what turned into be like, months and months of remote work for us very manageable. So I think I just really appreciated the leadership in that respect, and having priorities as a team down pat so that we could really mold ourselves to who needed to be called in the evening and during the day and next to my Wi-Fi because it had the best, service and this, that, and the other. So
Teamwork makes the dream work. That has definitely been a motto I have said over and over again in the sector. But yeah, thank you. I think for anyone, if you're watching this and you're really excited to apply, yes, flexibility is key. And that's in any, honestly, not even nonprofit. I guess nonprofit sector can be very tumultuous at times because of its nature with funding, but any position, any job that you're going to be going into post Princeton, you're going to need flexibility for sure. But speaking of some fun things that might pop up, I would love to hear from y'all about what surprised you about your fellowship experience. And Jasmeene, I know you definitely probably have some stories there as well.
Yeah, I definitely, coming in, I had assumed, this is going to be a jump for me personally because I am much more in tune with ground level work, and to make the switch to administration was completely different. So it was an expected surprise, but I think that I was even more surprised to be affirmed in so many skills that I thought were not valuable in the workplace, like a lot of interpersonal skills, a lot of just questioning how people interact, why they interact, how that affects other people and stakeholders that they work with, especially amidst like turnover and changing responsibilities. Like those interpersonal skills are so important. The value of people and equity is important, and people, in government truly do love these things, and they are operationalizing them to serve the rest of the state, right? That was, maybe it's not so surprising to other people, but that was immensely surprising to me. Blew my mind that people were, at such a high level and said, I care about people. People are the most important. Self-care is really important. There's all these really soft skills, and it's not just about, accomplishing a lot. So that was something that was super, super surprising, super affirming. And I feel like I can be a little bit pickier when I'm applying to things next and saying, I want a company or an organization that really values people the same way I do. Because there are a lot out there. There really are. I think that we don't always get pointed into those directions to find such organizations, but they exist. They're out there. There are many of them, and there are really great fits for you as well if you value that.
Yes, I will also say self-care. I know it's been branded as this like very catchy, trendy thing, like throw a bath bomb in your tub, go do this. No, but like true self-care is really hard, right? It is aligning those values, that it's setting those boundaries, it's being flexible when you need to be, but also prioritizing your growth and your health and your well-being. And that can feel really hard in nonprofit when we want to give and we want to give and we want to give and like do our best. But again, another quote that I've always come back to from when I started my service many, many years ago was you can't, what is it? You can't fill from an empty cup, right? So you always want to make sure you're filling up your cup. But any other surprises? I know, Connor, you had one you wanted to mention. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, forgot about the mute. Yeah, I think one of the things for me that was a very pleasant surprise was kind of how supportive I found the senior staff and my supervisor. I expected that to be part of the role, but it often felt that they were more interested and more committed to my development than I was at times. You know, like every couple of weeks, like, have you been doing stuff for yourself? Like, these projects can wait a little bit. You need to be, this is about you too. And we don't want you doing work that isn't beneficial for your growth. And so that was kind of really surprising, how much importance was kind of placed on the development of me personally, just beyond the organization. And it just felt very nice to have senior staff like having your back and wanting the best for you. And so having these mentors from slightly different backgrounds invested in your growth was a really nice experience, and being another, like a new location, a place I'd never been before. And, you know, I call them my work moms. Like it's great. They're always looking out for me, and like, oh, you should try this restaurant. Things beyond work as well. So that's kind of been really nice. The kind of very much familial feel of work. And that's something that really made the idea of me leaving seem rather silly, because I'd always planned to take 2 years out before hopefully going to graduate school. And so after the first few months and realizing this was the situation and feeling all the support, it just didn't make sense for me to not continue.
And Charlotte, you're also continuing, but not as I know Connor's continuing as a fellow again for another year, which we'll touch back on later. But Charlotte, you're also staying with Altitude.
Yeah, exactly. So I would absolutely just double click on what Connor said. I'm staying on for another year. I guess just, you know, as a member of the team, like sort of a, you know, hired employee, which is exciting. But yeah, absolutely. I was just amazed by the level of support and the people-centered culture at my organization. And that's absolutely why I'm staying. I did not expect my manager to have those types of conversations with me where she was saying, oh, like, you do have a seat at the table. Like, we want to hear your voice and even your strategic input. Like, I feel like the stereotype for entry-level jobs is like, you know, someone who's executing, you know, on like an operational front, or sort of getting things like mailed and doing the sort of really tedious work. But although I do some of that, like I also feel like I'm in those conversations where, you know, more strategic decisions are taking place. So really happy to be a member of this team, and it's just, yeah, such a great organization. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'm just putting a little note in the chat as a gentle reminder for folks, if you need to sign off, this will also be recorded this session. So speaking of support, right? As you all know, and I've seen through the multiple cycles that I have supported, that the post-Princeton transition can be jarring at times, right? Like you're leaving this, we call it the Princeton bubble. And I think what makes Project 55 so unique compared to other fellowship programs is the level of support and community that we really try to foster. And so I'd love to hear from you all about the kind of support from our program that you've experienced.
Yeah, I can jump in first. I definitely did not expect the transition to be so difficult. I'm thinking, oh, wow, I noticed in my internships that I have work-life balance because I can end the day at a certain time and not be studying and doing PSATs all the time. But I think when you realize that it's more than just a couple months, and that whole first like week of getting settled into your place and trying to navigate how do I get to work, like that was a big one. I'm directionally challenged. I had a really supportive set of mentors who literally gave me this like 3-step checklist to everything I do the weekend before I start my job, which being a planner was super helpful for me. So they're like, map out your whole commute. Like, let's figure out what the spots to go if you get flustered and need to just, you know, center yourself and like get back to it. I was like, oh, I didn't even think I would need that. But it was such a helpful touch base to know that I had 2 mentors to problem solve with throughout the course of the year, whether it was looking at, you know, how do I want to manage my studying for law school with my work balance and traveling across the state, or if it's, you know, how do I work out this interaction with somebody that I'm doing a project with that just didn't seem right to me. I don't know how to communicate like discomfort or push back on a deadline. And it was just so helpful to know that I don't have to like think about it myself. And there are people who've been in the professional world for anywhere from a decade to like forever. That really helped me to just talk common sense into my head. And I appreciated my cohort as well. The Chicago cohort is so full of these people who are just so much fun and who love to just hear about how you're doing in your own space. We definitely had like happy hours and Zoom calls where we're just like, oh, can we just talk about this experience that happened? And am I reacting the right way? Can we just laugh about this? And I feel like some of us were already friends before, and I think we established some really great friendships this year in the world outside of Princeton that are so valuable. And it's hard to think of, like Soraia said, like in what spaces do you have a mentor or a cohort that are so supportive in another organization? I can't really think of one.
Thank you. Yes, that warms my heart to hear all of that. And just, I think it's really important, the peer-to-peer perspective, right? Because when you're a fellow, and if you change, you're going to a whole new city potentially, and you're entering a whole new community, and you're at work and something happens and you're like, I'm feeling this way. How do I react? Is this normal? Like that affirmation of a peer going, I've experienced that too. Okay, how do we navigate that together? Can be really powerful. Charlotte, how about you share a little bit of your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. This sort of support element has been an absolute highlight of this fellowship experience. I feel like the whole year I've been surrounded by like concentric circles of support, you know, from like Soraia and AlumniCorps to our regional steering committee in the Bay Area to even like my roommate. Like one of my roommates is also a fellow, and like a bunch of us lived in the same apartment building. So I've just built this like layered community, which I was not at all expecting, but it's been such a highlight. And especially since I'm from Massachusetts originally and was kind of navigating a new city, I like basically switched coasts. It was definitely a little bit intimidating at first, but I just felt like it was so great to, you know, have this group that organized events for us. Like we went to a baseball game in the fall, and then we had these regular seminars where I was learning about, you know, how do I like backwards design potential career paths. And then we also had informal discussions like this. We did this like, you know, reflection exercise about, you know, how we were doing and, you know, how we'd grown throughout the year. So just so grateful for that. And then the last piece I'll mention is my mentor, Marty Krasny. He's Princeton class of 1967. So I think he's like in his mid 70s, but he's also been a great resource and has experienced a lot of different industries and career paths, and it's just sort of been a great, you know, guide for me throughout the year. So the mentorship piece, the regional steering committee, and then if you can, kind of building community with like peer-to-peer sort of with other fellows. I think those, and then yeah, Soraia and sort of the national programming, like all of that is just such a great multi-level system of support.
Yeah, I can jump in because my experience was pretty similar. It was amazing and definitely like a highlight of the fellowship experience. The Boston cohort was pretty small, and it was just the 4 of us actually at MNet. So it was kind of fun to like the four of us got really close, I'd say, especially working like literally cubicles apart. But I think it was also special because we sort of would do events as a cohort, but with all of our mentors together. Like we had dinner, we went to museums, a couple of different dinners actually. And it was just like really nice to have a community of like-minded people, and to connect you to other people that, you know, in the city and in the community. Especially just, again, like this Boston was a totally new city for me, and I didn't really know anybody, and it was just like really, really helpful to feel that support from the beginning. Yeah, and MNet also, my organization is like used to taking P55 fellows for the past couple of years, I think, and so they really jump in on the fellowship experience and definitely like recognize that it, you know, it's important for the unfortunately the retreat that had to be canceled due to COVID, but they were really excited for us, and there really is like those added layers of support you really don't find anywhere else. So it's super, super special.
Yeah, similar to how Lena was saying, I was in an organization that had a current fellow, well, a fellow that was there the year before. And so that kind of made the transition feel very smooth. Very instantly, she came up to me and said, "Hi, like, tell me about your thesis." You know, she felt very kind of at home already, and kind of we had our own mini bubble within that bubble. So it was really nice just to be able to ask her, and, oh, how did this go? Or how did you navigate this? And it was helpful to kind of setting up roots in a new place. I'd never been to the city before. And so that's, like everybody else has said, like the cohort and our mentors are really helpful in that as well. And I mentioned my staff as well, colleagues, just, you know, recommending restaurants or things to do outside of work, kind of working on the kind of holistic experience. But also, like, I mean, the support actually for me started beyond, well, before the actual experience started. I had visa issues, and so, you know, I was communicating with Soraia and Karen in my workplace, and then I had a phone conversation with Karen before, who's another one of the P55 staff and AlumniCorps, and she was just telling me, you know, ways to approach situations with my boss, and I hadn't even met them yet. So that was like super helpful, definitely from the start, and also up until now, occasionally we receive pictures of Bufa, and that's kind of the chief happiness officer of P55, Soraia's dog, and like from time to time, like we'll get a call from Soraia or a text, and it's always seems to come at like the nicest time. Just when it, you know, you look at your phone, you see a text, and you're like, oh, that's nice. Like, it's nice to feel like there's someone there, and it just always seems to be a good time. So kind of come back, everybody said, kind of support coming from all different angles and in all different forms.
Oh, again, my heart is so warmed. Also, Bufa's not here right now, but he very much appreciates the love. Bufa's my puppy. If you become a fellow, you will see photos of him at some point because I'm a dog parent. What can I say? But the level of support is genuine, but also we joke around, but like, you join a family, you know, sometimes we like our family, sometimes we don't. We hope you like ours and you want to stay involved with ours. And speaking, I know Lena mentioned the retreat, which again, also we were so excited to host. We do an annual mid-year retreat, but because of COVID-19, we had to cancel and kind of restructure some of our programming. And so for you all, having experienced some of the in-person programming and then shifting to virtual program because of COVID-19 and even virtual work, just y'all have experienced a lot of change. Like, let's talk about flexibility, like people right here. Like, y'all have had a really interesting year, just as our attendees have had with their past year with Princeton. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts around our programming and also Princeton AlumniCorps and our team and local area communities' response to COVID-19 and how that's impacted your experience. And anyone, feel free to start.
Yeah, I can chime in. Well, I think off the bat, our mentors and our area committee were like immediately reaching out and like, are you guys okay? Is there anything that you need or anything we can help with? I think like just knowing that they were there should crazy things happen. We had me and I actually roomed with another fellow, and we had sort of a tumultuous leaving of our apartment with our landlord, and I won't get into it, but it was kind of, it was a lot. And it was nice to know that there was people checking in, because that was also something that neither of us had really dealt with before, was like ending a lease early and navigating that, especially during a pandemic and stuff like that. So that was really, really helpful. And then I think the other thing that just really impressed me with the whole organization was, you know, that Soraia definitely organized a lot of these seminars, sorry, lost the word, seminars on like a variety of different topics for us to like take time out of our day and just like be able to focus on like personal growth and development. And I really felt like, even though the retreat had to be canceled, you know, everyone at P55 and AlumniCorps was still in our corner and trying to help us like on that personal growth journey. So that for me was really important.
Absolutely. I think there was definitely an increasing, I mean, this was a through line throughout the whole year, but there was sort of an increasing emphasis on self-care and mindfulness, which I really appreciated, not only with our national sort of group seminars, but also like for me with the local steering committee, when we had sort of our seminars throughout the spring, we would always start with, I don't know if any of you have done this, but it's called like the blob tree reflection exercise. I can actually have a link, I can put it in the chat, but this is like an example, but it's sort of like a cute illustration with different blobs, like kind of like human-esque blobs kind of in different poses, or that all kind of occupy the same scene. And we had to sort of choose one or two and kind of describe how it matched up with how we were feeling, which seems simple, but it was just a great exercise to sort of validate each other's mindsets and sort of emotions before launching in to the content of our meeting. So I just appreciate that sort of people first, you know, self-care, mindfulness sort of mentality, and that especially the idea that that was a priority as we were all kind of dealing with the challenges of COVID.
I definitely echo what Charlotte said. I think with the seminar programming, really focusing in on self-care and the different aspects of it, I think that was super helpful for me as well, especially because I think we all have a particular idea of what self-care means, and it really broadened my perspective to, oh, I'm doing this thing that is definitely not self-care, and I thought it was because it kind of made me feel better for 5 minutes and then I would feel worse. But I think just like the affirmation that it's such a weird time to be dealing with a national pandemic, global pandemic. It's just the weirdest thing, but even more reason to really, you know, check in with yourself, check in with others. And I also echo what Lena had mentioned earlier, just the outpouring of support from the local area committee and mentors, especially. Just when you feel like you can't be any more supported, bam, there they are. And that was really meaningful to me, knowing that, like, especially in the middle of March when I was like, okay, I've got, you know, a couple months left. What does this mean for jobs? What does this mean for, you know, figuring out whether I'm staying on or not? What does this mean being in like a national hotspot of the virus, especially being in Chicago? It put a lot of peace of mind on the table, which was super, super needed, super needed.
Connor, any thoughts you want to share before we kind of go into our next little segment?
I jumped out for a sec. Was this regarding COVID?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Just around, any thoughts around your experience with our program team and committees and mentors in response to COVID-19 and the support you've experienced through that?
I think one of the things that stands out most to me was kind of transitioning the retreat to our online kind of workshops. So I don't know if anybody mentioned this, but kind of the hour-long sessions or just over that we would have kind of every Monday. I wasn't super thrilled at first. I thought it would be super awkward, but you'd go into a breakout room and you'd say hi to someone whose name you'd seen and recognized, but you had to pretend you didn't know each other. You'd say hi, and all of a sudden it's like 5 minutes later, you guys are actually talking about something serious that's going on, but getting to know someone better. And, you know, after some of the conversations, you send a private message like, oh, it's great to talk to you today, great to get to know you, and you have a new Facebook request. Or, you know, like it was nice to not feel alone, kind of just all experiencing this at the same time. And I like the fact that it continued despite not being able to meet in person. So just, yeah, that continuation and almost just forcing ourselves into a little bit of awkwardness was definitely worth it. Coming out at the end, just feeling more comfortable and you know, getting used to this. I have to do this all the time for work now. So it was a great experience.
I promise y'all, it was awkward for us too, trying to navigate and like learn how to do everything virtually. I'm used to doing in-person facilitation. But I will say that that's part of what we're all learning is, what does community mean? How do we connect within community virtually, right? And one thing that came from that is one of our last sessions, we had some breakouts and y'all were able to kind of like connect with one another and talk about some more serious issues. And I think that's something that I've carried on to this year and for following years. While we're having virtual programming, we do a fellows hour once a month where fellows can sign on and have those breakout groups to talk about what experiences you're experiencing at work, outside of work, personally, professionally, justice related, intentionally creating that online space. So hopefully that'll be something everyone that's listening will be excited for. And so before we take some questions from folks, that's one of my dogs, sorry. Stop it, please. I'm on a webinar. I would love for y'all to share about any valuable lessons that you have learned from your fellowship. And now I'm gonna mute myself so I can go grab my dog, one of the dogs.
I'm happy to get started. There's so many valuable lessons, but I think one major lesson for me was that, you know, as a fellow or just kind of in the professional world in general, you know, you can incorporate learning into your everyday work. Like I kind of thought like, oh, I need to show up and like know how to do X, Y, Z, or I need to like know the answers sort of. But I found myself, you know, every day chipping away at sort of developing my proficiency in new like tools and systems. Like I wasn't super familiar with like Salesforce, for example, or like HubSpot was our marketing email software that we used, and sort of like Excel and Google Sheets, and kind of like a lot of those systems I was intimidated. Like I studied art history, came from this humanities background, and was sort of like, ooh, I'm like not sort of super well versed in some of these like more systems oriented responsibilities, but you know, that's okay. And I think, yeah, that was an important takeaway for me. Like you can incorporate learning into your job, both independently and also just leveraging your teammates.
I love that. I think that's really poignant for me as well. And I think also in a similar vein, being okay with the fact that you're going to have certain expectations going in, and it's okay not to have those be met, because sometimes you will have a completely other set of skills and experiences that far surpass what you had expected, and they're equally, if not more valuable. And I think like having the ability to take stock of like, what are you thinking of that you really expect to be part of this experience, and realizing that sometimes the most present experience that you will have is just sitting in where you are now and letting it just happen. It's scary because I think a lot of Princeton folks are really type A about how everything needs to go down. But it can be really valuable just to allow yourself to be very present and to allow things to happen and just roll with it. I think it speaks a lot to being in the nonprofit space, as well as, you know, out in the world, things are going to happen like COVID, and you just kind of have to keep going. And then I think something else that surprised me was that social impact work and civic engagement, they can look so many different ways beyond what we think they look like. And that's the beauty of having so many organizations who are committed to service and committed to people. They find really unique ways to engage in social impact work and civic engagement. And that is just super awesome. It's super affirming, not only to know that there's somebody who's interested in exactly what you want to do that's super niche, or that you can be one of those next people who are going to create that space and continue to inspire others. So off my soapbox.
Yeah, I really love that. I totally agree that it's so important to just kind of experience it and let it happen and learn from it. I think I learned a lot about myself with this year, especially just like working and like doing something for a whole year. Which, you know, in the past I hadn't really done. I'd only done like internships and stuff over the summer, but really like getting involved and getting to be an integral part of an organization, I think really allowed me to learn about like what I really enjoyed doing and what I really didn't enjoy doing as much, which really like helped refine my focus for the next couple of years. I think like a big standout for me is also like self-advocacy, especially within like a larger organization, because where I work it's a really, really big research group, and there are a lot of people doing a lot of really important things. But I learned, and you know, I'm someone who I kind of like what Charlotte said, I want to be like learning and growing with this year. And I think the importance of realizing like, hey, like I want to take on like a different project, like or adding to the responsibilities and just like finding ways to continue like your own learning and growth. Like sometimes you just have to chime in. They won't always really fall into your lap. So I think I learned a lot about advocating for myself, especially like to seek out opportunities that were exciting to me.
I can run things off. And for me, I think one of the most tangible takeaways, so I studied Orphe, and so, you know, I had this very theoretical data science approach, but I wanted to see, you know, how does this actually work in the real world, in a real setting where things are limited, and, you know, like, what is the difference? How does that really come about? And so kind of bridging that gap and learning how to present data and finding and results to people of all different backgrounds, those that are very familiar, those that are not so, and, you know, different types of presentation for different types of people, and helping people ask the right questions. I think that's another huge part of that, is you can have this data, but what does it mean? And so that was kind of very personally helpful. And I think similar to what Jasmeene was saying, kind of the breadth and variation of people kind of being interested in this same central theme, but from all different angles, or like different nuances of it. I love just seeing the breadth and variation in the way people are tackling issues for social impact. And for me, that's been hugely helpful in shaping my next steps and kind of expanding what I see is going to be like the future for me and what my next steps are going to look like.
Yeah, so before we get right into some questions, real quick, a sentence if you'd like to share what your next steps are. I know for some of us, you know, you're going to be staying with your organization, you're going to be continuing as a fellow, but real quick snippet. And if you don't know, that's totally cool too, right? Like, that's totally fine. That's part of this journey.
I am going to medical school this fall in Chicago.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll see you around.
Yeah. Well, I actually hear back next week from a couple of my top 2 choices. So fingers crossed and like praising Jesus. But I'm hoping to do something in the legal field. I'm applying to law school this fall. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Make some magic happen.
Sending luck your way. Sending luck your way.
So I am continuing for the one last year, but in the meantime, I'm in the medical school application cycle now, so hopefully be following Lena's footsteps.
Good luck.
Yeah, I'm staying on for another year, and I've been working on the sales and marketing team, and continue to be interested in, you know, marketing and business and its intersection with mission-based work. So not sure if I'll stick with ed tech or sort of education, but really excited to continue exploring business and marketing from a mission-based perspective, and hopefully that will continue to be an interest of mine even after my work with altitude learning.
Oh, I'm just so excited for all of you. Oh, all the best things, all the good energy is being sent your way. So folks, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A function. I have one question here. Let me pull it up. Oh, my face is like, I'm smiling so much that like my face hurts. How is the transfer between Princeton and a job at your organization? And I know you spoke a little bit of that transition, but specifically, I guess your work as a Princeton student to then working within an organization. Anyone want to take that on?
Honestly, it's so strange to have so much time after 5:30. I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but I was like, wow, what do I fill this time with now that I'm done work for the day? In terms of like that kind of workload, it's also like much less stressful, I would say. But yeah, you have a lot of free time to like pursue your interests and your hobbies and, you know, focus on self-care. And for me, you know, MNet did a really good job of training us from the beginning. So I started in June actually. So I started pretty early because the previous fellows had kind of left already. So they were eager to have us come and do the calls. But it was really great. I really felt like I kind of like got to like grow up a little bit because of that.
I will also emphasize there's so much time after 5 or 5:30. I struggled to figure out what is my hobby. Like I did a lot of music at Princeton, but if you're not trying to be a professional musician in Chicago, it's a little difficult sometimes. I ended up like getting really into baking, and so I would like make so many cakes and like get like the professional level like decorating things and bring it to work almost every week. That was like how I pawned it off on people. But I think it's something interesting to think about. Like, what are the things that, you know, you just want to do for fun, like low level of risk and expectation there, and you can do it. You can also eat cake for dinner if you want to. That's adulting. That's totally acceptable sometimes.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Okay, Charlotte, did you want to answer? We have another question, so.
We can move on.
Yeah. So I have here, what do you suggest? Okay, I'm not muted. What do you suggest that we think about right now for applying this year? I'm assuming that is a question for the applicants. If not, put in the chat if that was meant for me. But yeah, would anyone like to offer? Maybe that was what I was going to try to end with, is like, what's some key advice for applicants?
I would say it's probably really helpful to just look through the list of organizations that are currently partners, and that's a good first step sometimes, just to keep an open mind while you look at that list and think of, oh, like, you know, location might be important to some people. For some people, it's, you know, being in the arts or being in a certain field because it's answering a question that you have about law school or medical school or whatever you hope to do. But that can be a really good place to start if you have no idea where to go. And really think about, you know, what are a couple organizations that you could see yourself either in a really like safe way or in a really like, it would be a stretch, but this would be a really great question for me to ask myself this year and to find that answer.
One thing that I would say, if you know anyone or even any of us, I'm sure we'd all be willing to answer, but I was speaking to somebody that was also applying to medical school when I was in your position, and asking him, like, so what was your motivation here? What did you think you would get out of this? And it was really interesting just seeing how that helped his advancement, helped him to just kind of sharpen up what it is that he wanted to do. I think something that's really interesting, and I've noticed more when talking to other people that aren't necessarily on fellowships, is kind of the openness at the workplace with regards to knowing what your next steps are. Like, people know that my goal isn't to stay in education, but they know that you're very willing to work on this, and they are eager to use your skills and develop them in a way that helps you going forward as well. You know, just because it's not directly healthcare, for example, doesn't mean there's not a lot of overlap or things that can help you. And I think so that's like a really kind of poignant thing I only really realized recently when I've spoken to other people, that you know, they couldn't dare mention next steps in front of their boss, because then they're going to be starting looking for a new replacement. And so yeah, that's kind of two things in one, but that's kind of the two things I would keep in mind. Like, this is very much just a hugely foundational year that can really help you clear up what you want to do next, what you do or don't like.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be, I don't want to sound too prescriptive because it's, but like one like exercise you could do, either like, you know, actually writing down or sort of just in your head, is kind of thinking through like, you know, 2 columns. Like, one could be like past work experiences or internships or clubs or classes, whatever, where you kind of felt like you had some kind of realization about like the type of work environment you'd like to be in. And then the other could be like, what are some like hypotheses you still feel like you need to test? You know, like, do I want to be in like a large organization that's well established with like a clear, you know, methodology? Would I prefer like a newer startup where there are kind of faster deadlines? There's a lot of like dynamic decision making happening. Like those could be kind of interesting questions to start asking yourself, because, you know, I have like a few friends across the fellowship program, and, you know, a lot of people have had super positive experiences, but it does vary. Like the type of work that you do and the type of experience you have does seem to vary pretty dramatically depending on your organization. So I think just starting to ask yourself those kinds of questions could be a useful starting point.
Yes, yes, yes to everything that y'all have shared so far. I think that's a really great question. And also, if any applicants like want to talk through it, I host office hours. I'm more than happy to talk about what compels you to want to join a nonprofit sector, and then go from there and talk out what maybe you're looking for in your experience. I love talking to folks, so please just like email me. We'll set up office hours. So I have one last question, and then we can wrap up. And it's, what does the placement process look like? And now that's a logistical question that I'm more than happy to answer during office hours, one-on-one with folks, or during my next info session, which will be in August. But I would love a quick kind of experiential like perspective of each of you have gone through the placement process, right? You've gone through interviewing with our staff, and then interviewing with partner organizations, and then potentially getting some offers and figuring out where you wanted to go. So if anyone wants to share any thoughts around that before we wrap up.
I feel like it's a good segue from the last question, in that I think I was one person who like had an idea of what I wanted to do, and that quickly changed like through my fellowship. But I had like one or two ideas, and in the interview with Soraia and AlumniCorps folks, I think I had an AlumniCorps alum in the interview as well, who like, both of you just sat down and said, oh, these could be some really good options for you to consider in placement. That was super helpful. And I just want to emphasize that like this interview process is probably, like, interviews are usually scary. This one is not. There's no need to be like super uptight. Like we just want to make sure there's a good fit for you. And that is something that's very unique. And then the partner organizations, once you have a couple of referrals into like 2 or 3, those are more like traditional interviews. But again, I think Connor had mentioned there's an understanding of what it means to be a fellow and where you are in your professional journey. And so it's not as scary as you probably would find other interviews. It's again like really affirming, and they're trying to help you find a good fit. So don't be afraid. We're trying to help you. It's good. It's all good vibes.
That should be the slogan on the website, like of the portal of the application. We're trying to help you, we swear. Anybody else have any final thoughts? All right, well then, thank you all so much for joining and sharing about your experiences and just sharing the space again. It's been very lovely to see you all and hear about how you're doing. And I always love to hear from fellows about their experiences. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to connect, even though you're not necessarily face-to-face with some of our applicants, but you know, you're sharing your experience. And I would definitely say if any applicants would love to hear from you, if you're open to being a source of, I don't know, like guidance, or just, hey, if you want to answer some questions, feel free to pop your email into the chat, your contact info if you'd like. And if not, that's totally okay. And so for folks that are listening, I will be planning other virtual events throughout the fall, given that we will not be in person. There is an info session next month, and then I also am hosting virtual office hours until the deadline in November, because our application date has moved up this year to a November deadline instead of December because of the academic calendar that's shifting. Y'all are just not getting a break. So many changes happening. And so if you would like to schedule office hours with me, please reach out via email and we'll sync calendars, and I'm more than happy to talk with you one-on-one. Yeah, and so thank you so much for joining. And folks, if you're listening in, you can catch this recording. It'll be ready hopefully by next month, just with all the website changes. And if you have any questions, reach out, okay? All right, so feel free to log off, and hopefully I'll hear from you all soon. And as for our attendees, our panelists, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
All right. If y'all need anything, just reach out.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.